I got a tour at the world's most secure radioactive bombing site, a top secret site where normal citizens are banned from visiting it because of over 928 nuclear explosions as well as top secret research. Only 300 people a year get to visit this site, and I was one of those 300 people. Statistically, I had a higher chance of shaking the president's hand or getting struck by lightning than getting this opportunity. This is the story on how I got this tour and what I saw. What I wanted to make clear is that everything I show you and what I'm about to talk to you about is declassified, and I was given permission to talk about this. And no, US government, of course I'm not going to talk about something that I'm not supposed to. About 6 months before the tour, I was asked to submit all of my information, including from where I was born up until my most recent living information. So there was a total of 2 background checks. The first one was a very basic one, just to check that I was a US citizen, and the second one was essentially checking that I had no real foreign ties and I wasn't a threat to the US government. Every time I messaged the Nevada National Security site back about my tour, they always never responded to me. Even when I asked legitimate questions of what else I could bring and what I can't, they just did not respond. Thank you, government employees. As expected, I was told not to bring anything that I shouldn't bring to an airport, plus even more. They banned every single person from bringing any electronics at all, from watches to even phones, and beyond that, they also banned people from picking up any of the soil because it's still radioactive, and if you were caught picking up the soil, you were gonna get a charge. The only backpacks that were allowed were the completely transparent ones, so you could see everybody's business. And then finally, 30 days before my tour, I finally got an email saying I was absolutely confirmed, and here is the schedule for where we are going and what you could have for lunch. Surprisingly, they said we could either bring our own food or we could get food from their cafeteria. Short story is, I flew in a day before our tour into Las Vegas, and then the next morning at 7:30 a.m., I had to be present at the Atomic Museum. And the thing that shocked me is that they didn't even check me for anything. And I'm serious, we walked in, they just checked off our name by comparing our driver's license name to a list they had, and that's it. No pat down, no metal detector, no real security. I guess they must really trust a background check. And then pretty much they just give us another rectangular badge that you would normally use for whatever else, and it just said NNSS Public Tours. Either way, there was a total of 2 people in charge, and that was the camera guy and the bus driver. As it sounds, the camera guy snapped some pics on a digital camera as well as did the tour narration, and the bus driver, drove the bus. We left around 8 a.m. from the Atomic Museum on our way to Mercury, Nevada on one of these kinds of buses. So the first thing the tour guide told us was that the Department of Energy completely funds these public tours, as well as that we had a whole case of cold water. During the drive, that's almost longer than an hour, everybody was asking various questions to the tour guide, and I asked the most important question that I could. I asked if he knew anything about the Groom Lake Base, aka Area 51. And I am not even kidding you, this is what the tour guide said, quote unquote. "I don't know what you were talking about, sir." And multiple people ended up asking about this, and he gave the same response. Of course, even if he did tell me anything, I wouldn't tell you guys because he probably asked me not to. When we arrived around Mercury, we crossed the famous line where nobody without a badge isn't supposed to cross. And then what the tour guide ended up telling us is that people cross this line all the time. The people who cross this line often say that they crossed it because they didn't see the sign or the line or anything like that, or they just kept on going and they were distracted or something, and it's just a lame excuse. And by the time they get to the security gate, it's already way too late. The employees that work at this site drive extremely ordinary cars, so crossing the line with a normal car is not really suspicious, but as soon as you get to the gate and turn around, however, you are alerting everybody that you're not supposed to be here. Idiotic human nature at its finest. Now, we drive all the way to the security gate, and an armed guard gets on the bus and checks the roster along with making sure everybody has a badge. And still, nobody searches our person, and we just continue on the tour. Like, what if I just brought a camera or an audio device and started recording or snuck out soil samples? Of course, just to clarify, I am not doing that, but I am making a legitimate statement. So on this tour schedule, I'm not going to go over every single stop, but I'm going over the human experience of actually being there. Within Mercury, the bus pulled over and we finally got to step on the soil of the Nevada test site. I felt the 105 degrees of dry heat hitting the back of my throat and my nose, and I couldn't even open my eyes without sunglasses. For the first time ever in my life, I actually saw a tumbleweed tumbling across the road in what seemed like weather that had no wind. We went inside this grab-and-go cafeteria staffed by one employee and asked various questions. The employee stated that they have a 2-hour round-trip commute from Vegas to here every day, and they get travel pay just to work 4 days a week. Mercury also has a post office, mini hospital, dorms, and a Nye County Sheriff's Office, so I was intrigued that a local county sheriff office would be on federal property. It was told to us that in the 1950s and 60s that this town was absolutely booming with people, and they had movie theaters and all sorts of other entertainment. Nowadays, it's just an entire miniature town frozen in time with 1950s cylinder block buildings that haven't changed a bit, besides the paint and minor renovation. I often forget that federal employees are people too, just because of Hollywood movies always making them look like they're suits, but every single person I met around there, they were wearing ordinary clothes, no badges or anything, and they were happy to talk. I wanted to make it clear that almost everyone here at the Nevada test site is a contractor, so they do not work for the Department of Energy, rather a company that might have research going on here or contributing to the construction ongoing. As we continued our tour and got back on the bus, I kept talking with the people around me. And what I noticed is every single person that was on that tour was carefully chosen in some way. For example, a few people had government experience, a few others had government ties, and just everybody literally had some kind of important role in society. From all the conversations I had, it just seemed like everybody they chose was very neutral, like nobody had any political leanings, everybody was just higher level of intellectual sanity. Of course, that was just my observations. An interesting story that the tour guide told us was that there was a drone breaching over the Nevada test site airspace. An employee allegedly spotted the drone just flying around and reported it, and when they tried to find the person who was in charge of the drone, they just never did. And so that entire day, everybody's cars were checked. Their wheel wells, their trunks, their glove boxes, and even some of the seats were taken out. Apparently, the security breach is well known amongst staff members and other security. The tour guide also stated that this person was absolutely not an employee of the security site, and they were also never caught. Unless, of course, security did catch them, but they kept everything low-key to avoid any attention. Who actually knows? Continuing on our drive, we eventually reached a lunch spot, which is a different cafeteria than the first one we went to. And while we were talking to the multiple employees at that location, they all told us that multiple tour groups come there a day. We were all confused. We thought we got an exclusive tour, not a tour for everybody, but it turns out that politicians, scientists, and other observers come on separate groups all the time. The difference between the tour I was on and the tour that they were on is that their tour was catered to their specific experiment. The cafeteria area wasn't anything special. It was like a typical cafeteria that you'd see at a museum or a zoo. And the employees at the second cafeteria told us that they also took the same bus as the first cafeteria people. Once we finished lunch, we started driving again on the road, and then the tour guide told us a story of how two hikers in the 1960s hiked their way onto the Nevada National Security Site in a lethal bombing zone. Apparently what happened was security spotted them pretty quickly, and right before a bomb went on, they actually halted the experiment and immediately detained the people. And those two hikers were the only ones who trespassed that we know of besides the people who come through the main gate area. Throughout our drive, we noticed a lot of jackrabbits, but the thing that really stood out were the Joshua trees. So these Joshua trees were humongous, and they looked like they were untouched for hundreds of years. So I've been to Joshua Tree National Park, and I can confirm it's like the most concentrated amount of Joshua trees that you could find. But in the Nevada test site, it was the oldest and largest ones I have ever seen. And it gets even more interesting when you find out that the wildlife in the area shows you where ground zero was for these explosions. You can literally see land filled with dozens of trees go to absolutely nothing. Like if you had a satellite view, you could see a giant circle with no trees that was miles wide, and that's how we were able to know that that site was ground zero. The next coolest thing that we saw was a counterterrorism safety training facility. So safety personnel are taught there on how to seek out nuclear material. And it was incredible because you got to see a giant train on tracks over there. And there was even a Delta commercial airliner that was taken apart for that purpose. So what the tour guide told us is when that plane got originally put down onto the security site, that a bunch of Google Maps snoopers decided to go check that area and found the airplane. And they tried to spam call the Nevada National Security Site lines over and over and over, trying to report a plane crash or keep asking about questions. And one of the final places we visited was Frenchman Flat. And it was cool because it was literally a desert flat and had so many different kinds of patterns from small amounts of rain. And you could see a bridge that was completely bent. The entire truss was bent because of a nuclear explosion exploding in that direction. And you could see the curvature of that. So before we head back to Las Vegas, we got one more 10-minute bathroom break. And then essentially we started driving out. And as soon as we crossed the line, the tour guide pretty much asked everybody to hand over their badges because they did a count. And we arrived back in Las Vegas around 5:10 p.m. So how exactly did I get this tour? Well, there's about 3 ways. So the first way is more common for the general public, and that is just going to the Nevada National Security Site's website. And 2 times a year, they open a portal for 30 minutes where thousands of people apply for only 300 spots. Now, the thing I don't know is how they do the choosing. Like, is it the first people who apply get in the tour the first time? Or is it literally that the government chooses which specific people they want on this tour? The second option is pretty much having connections with the Department of Energy or the Department of Defense. And essentially, you might be able to get your own private tour with other government employees. And the third way is to be involved in a major or minor project that includes the Nevada Security Site. For example, the University of Nevada in Las Vegas essentially has a nuclear engineering program and has ties with the Nevada National Security Site, so it's far easier getting on the site doing research that way. In my opinion, the second and third option are probably far easier to get in on a tour, but the first option is the most realistic for an ordinary citizen. I'm fairly confident that some of the people that were with me on this tour were not actually applying through the website and did have their own government connections. One thing that sucks is I was supposed to have more pictures to show you guys, and I guess they didn't get declassified and the government employees were not transparent about that, and I never got an email back about that a few days ago when I emailed them, which sucks. But if you guys did enjoy this video, please check out my other videos like on how the Chicago River has exploding flammable bubbles from rotting flesh, or my other video on how Route 66 literally has a cliff on both sides, and I'm not even kidding you, you could fall off. But if you guys enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and follow me for the next adventure.